Well, welcome to our viewers to the first panel of the Centre Court Specialised Masters panel with poets and quants. And over the next couple of days, my co-host John Byrne and myself, Matt Symonds, we will be welcoming admissions directors, senior program managers and alumni from many of the world's top business schools with their master's programs. That could be the Masters in Management, the MiM, the Masters in Finance, or the Masters in Business Analytics, three programs that have really taken off in recent years. Given the current job market, the idea of going to business school shortly after you come out of undergrad just makes so much sense. What better than investing in yourselves? So to bring together all of these voices from Asia, from across Europe, from North America, and we start with a wonderfully representative panel. And I'm delighted to welcome Virginie Fougea. Virginie is the Global Director of Admissions at Insead, with its campuses, of course, not only in Fontainebleau and Singapore, but also in Abu Dhabi, and I guess hoping to reopen the campus you have in San Francisco. It's lovely to see you again, Virginie.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having us.
And we also have the sort of the political connection, because just on the outskirts of Brussels, we have Sara Teuwen, who joins us from the Vlerick Business School in Belgium. Sara, it's great after, as you said, exchanging on email to finally be face-to-face on Zoom. Lovely to have you with us.
Indeed, thanks for having us. Very much looking forward to today.
And we cross the Atlantic to the heart of DC. And Nita Swinsick, who is the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. Nita, I can see the McDonough building in bright sunshine behind you. I bet you're eager to have the campus buzzing again, aren't you?
Indeed we are, yes. This is the fourth floor of our building and I'd love to be there at the moment. Unfortunately, this is a virtual background for the moment.
Well, we were also admiring the view that John White has chosen. John is the Executive Director of Enrollment at Wake Forest. And of course, that lovely North Carolina campus of yours with exotic trees. Now, you found that tree somewhere else, John, but great to have you starting the day with us and talking a little bit about some of the great options that the school has to offer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Great to see everyone today.
And so for all of us that are joining us both on Zoom and then following on the live stream, after each of the admissions panels, we then have breakout sessions. We wanted you to be able to talk to all of the schools. So we thought that rather than having to choose between any of the four, we've got two 30-minute sessions that then follow with two more so that you can speak to as many of the schools as possible. And then later on today, join us for alumni panels with London Business School, Imperial and ESMT from Berlin, and then more panels with admissions directors that John will be hosting later in the day. But let's start with the basics and this growing demand. It was 15 years ago, I think, when the FT did their first Masters in Management ranking. There were only 25 programs. Now there are 90. And of course, one that has recently joined that list, Virginie, is Insead, globally recognized for the full-time MBA program. But you launched a Masters in Management and welcomed your first class nearly a year ago. So tell us a little bit about why Insead was so keen to add the MiM to your portfolio of programs.
So that came in the discussions over the years to complete the offering. So we were already, so the flagship was the MBA, and quickly we moved on to the EMBA offerings, and to be able to complete the possibilities and answer everyone's needs for additional learning, we decided to launch this Master in Management, and we made it clear that it was a pre-experience program compared to the MBA, for which we require work experience, for example.
Great. Now we'll be looking at some of those details of what you can squeeze into pre-experience, because obviously your first intake of the MiM has probably reduced the average age on the. Is it great to have all of this, these sort of 22, 23-year-olds that have joined the school?
We love them. We love them. They're really a breath of fresh air on campus.
Oh, well,
For
yes,
sure.
that sense of purpose that they bring. Now, the Masters in Management, Sara, is a program that European business schools, it's been a flagship for many top European schools for years and years and years. Tell us a little bit about the Vlerick program, and probably much like Insead, this wonderful international audience that you're bringing to Belgium.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's a lot of different people, all very ambitious, wanting to make an impact into the world of today. And basically, it can be people from any background. And I think that's the nice thing about the Masters in Management. Indeed, no real experience required, and you can be an engineer or a psychologist or a doctor or an economist, and really wanting to venture out into a very specific company or sector, something for which you kind of need maybe some more hard skills and definitely also soft skills. And I think that's a great combination to get from a business school, but definitely also a win-win for us to then see those new startups being formed or people going into the more technology advanced or digital savvy manager world. So that's really the upcoming future. And that's exactly as Virginie said, what kind of gives us that new energy basically from those students.
Right, it strikes me that there's this wonderful positive synergy of the sense of the possible, both, you know, that the students bring with their ideas, their energy, and how you can mirror that.
Exactly.
What you help them able to explore.
Exactly, yeah, and that's the good thing about, I think, also the Masters in Management. I mean, especially with us, but I guess also with the other schools, you have lots of electives to choose from. You have some projects, you have different companies to explore, whether it's more, you know, the data analytics, business science track to kind of go into more everything about artificial intelligence, machine learning, whether it's the complete opposite and everything that has to do with HR and really the idea of kind of putting the people first and seeing how that kind of changed over the last year. I mean, 2020 is a strange year for everyone, and it probably won't stop there. But that's really the flexibility I think the program offers, that you can kind of mix and match some of the courses, some of the projects that really tailor to your program, to your background, and maybe also to your, I don't know, passion, values that you look for in a dream job, basically.
Right, and Sara, talking about putting people first, we're in the week of International Women's Day, Nita, and I just want to say 60%. Just this fact that at this sort of pre-experience level, the Masters in Management has proved to be immensely popular with young women looking to get that sort of business background. And I think it's 60% is the current gender balance or the breakdown of women in the MiM at McDonough. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We're very pleased to have 60% female representation. That's for our second class that came in. And it's a very diverse class in other respects as well. So we actually have 24% international citizens coming from 22 different countries. We have 27% underrepresented US minorities as well in the class. So really a fabulous class with students coming from so many different academic disciplines, all looking to go into different business areas as well. So just a very wonderful and collaborative cohort.
Right. I guess sort of, you know, hearing all of those voices in the corridors as they come out of the classrooms, it must be, and how they feed off one another for ideas, background. You know, we talked about the role that the school plays, but you know, classmates themselves are going to be a great source of next career steps that they take. Is that right?
Absolutely, and there's just so much team work and team projects, and I'm sure that's the case for all of the programs here. But students really do learn from one another. They network with one another going forward as well. There's a lot of immersive projects as well. So it's so important to have this diversity in the classroom because, you know, different perspectives really lead to a unique way of thinking.
John, I talked about the European business schools and you know, a portfolio of specialized masters programs that they've had, and how that's expanding in the US market. It's not that the MBA, you know, we're done with that. In fact, you know, there's really strong demand in the last year or two for the full-time MBA program. But where does the masters program fit? Do you think in the US school offering and at Wake Forest?
Sure, of course. Thank you. So interestingly, we no longer have a daytime full-time MBA program. We suspended the delivery of that back in 2016. There was much press about it. And we still have a working professional MBA program in both our Charlotte, North Carolina, and our main campus here in Winston-Salem. And then we now launched an online MBA program as well for working professionals. But within the portfolio I work on, we've got a master's in management, which we launched in 2006, a master's in accounting, and a master's in business analytics. And Wake is very unique in that we are a thriving liberal arts university, also with a graduate and undergraduate business school. Sometimes you don't really see that in US-based liberal arts universities. Personally, as a liberal arts major myself, I love the value that we place on liberal arts students, and then just building upon all the wonderful attributes that come with liberal arts experiences at the master's level. And I do want to make one plug for International Women's Day. We announced earlier this year that we will have our first female president. She's joining us from Vanderbilt in the fall. Our dean of the business school is also female, as the law school is, as the med school is as well. So exciting times for us. Like my peers on the program, we have wonderful female representation, which of course is reflective of the work population. So how perfect.
Right, that's a welcome plug. And I know that, you know, Insead, Donna, they both have wonderful senior female leaders within the school. We just featured the dean at Vlerick, Marianne de Bruin, and hopefully next year we'll have your new president featured sooner than a year from now. Let's make that happen. In terms of, I mean, you talk about liberal arts and what that brings. It might be difficult to distill, John, into one idea or one sentence, but for you, what does that capture in terms of the sort of the curiosity and an approach to learning?
It's a wonderful question. I think all the ideal things that come with a liberal arts study, if a student is doing what they need to be doing, a great thinker, a good collaborator, someone who's flexible, someone who people will work with, but also I like to say want to have lunch with as well. Somebody that is really a productive and contributing and positive member of the team. And certainly if there's something we need in the last year, I believe Sara called it a unique year, maybe we need more positivity everywhere. But I think taking all those wonderful attributes and then building on it with that 1 year of just critical business domain knowledge and watching the intersection of those two disciplines happen, it's just so exciting and rewarding to see the student take that next step with the 4 years and that they've had from a liberal arts experience, then that 1 year of critical business knowledge.
Right. Perhaps that's a good segue to Virginie, your earlier comment about it's a pre-experienced degree for Insead. And of course, typically the full-time MBA would be attracting individuals late 20, I mean, the average is, you know, sort of 28, 29, perhaps 5.5, 6 years professional experience. Now, when you define pre-experience, what does that mean for you? Is it straight out of undergrad, or do you prefer them to have a year or two to then join the program?
Mm-hmm. It can be straight out of undergrad or another master, indeed. We see also typically a lot of people having done internships during their undergraduate studies, or people who have done a gap year between year 2 and year 3, for example. I think the key differentiator comes with the level of responsibility already achieved in that position, because the way we have designed the Master in Management is really with a launch pad into your career and to gain responsibilities. And if you were to come with already some sort of full accountability for a project or even a junior member, then that will be better fitting the our goal for the MBA rather than the Master in Management. So it's really the level of responsibility more than the length itself of the work experience. So we've seen people having a year and a half, and it's still perfectly acceptable, or internships, multiple internships. More than 2 years, and some sort of really, as I said, like full accountability starts to be more towards the MBA. But the good thing is that we can do a transfer. So we speak to one another in the team and we say, hey, we have this profile for the Master in Management. What do you think? Rather for the MBA, and vice versa.
Got it. And at this early stage, Sara, I was only half joking when I said I'm still wondering the direction my career should take, but certainly in my early 20s, I think I was all over the map. Do you find, with applicants into the program and as they come in, do they already have a clear sense of career trajectory, or is that really something that you're going to accompany them with and explore together?
It really depends. Some of them really do. For instance, somebody who studied psychology and wants to really go into that kind of extra business side to then maybe go into consumer behavior and really go into specifically one area, one sector. But a lot of students indeed are still wondering, what kind of job would actually be right for me, because indeed, as Virginie said, they come with, you know, already a package of academic knowledge and maybe some experience, but they don't exactly know what kind of job am I really good at, but also what kind of corporate culture would actually suit me best. I think that's definitely something throughout all the networking events, definitely the one-on-one career coaching, that we kind of really show them first off, well, what is out there in the market, what kind of companies exist. Maybe some of them are new startups that I didn't even know existed, but very interesting to work for, but also kind of make them help, yeah, kind of sort of the match with them. Which one would actually fit best with you, and where would you have the biggest impact, the biggest added value? Is it indeed a sector that you've always thought of, or is it maybe something completely new? And then help you kind of explore that, maybe even tackle some more specific courses or soft skills to actually get there. So I think that's the biggest difference between an MBA, also the kind of explorative side of a master's, that you can really, both in the networking side and definitely meeting all these different companies, kind of seeing what is out there and what would actually indeed fit you best.
Right, and you mentioned those perhaps either with a psych background. Do you see in the sort of the undergraduate studies that people have pursued, STEM subjects, any that have also studied business and just want to go further with that? Is it quite a mix?
It is quite a mix, yeah, and it's also very diverse. Some of the students loved their background and really want to do something continuing that, which I of course get. If you have a 4 or 5 years degree in bioengineering, you kind of want to stick with that. But then maybe in a totally different position that you would actually do before. But even with economic students, sometimes by doing the Masters in Management, they feel a certain love or a passion for marketing that they've never even experienced, because again, they haven't been able to do it practically. So it can really vary very much. And indeed, I would need a sort of a magic 8-ball to really be able to say that from the start. But that's exactly what they're here for during the year as well, to kind of take, well, together with us, that journey to kind of see what their dream job is and where it lies.
Right, it's a big investment, Nita.
It is.
The applicant is making. One of my twin boys graduated from Georgetown last summer into the very uncertain conditions and a job market that we face. Do you think, Nita, that then pursuing the Masters in Management equips that individual and just a sense of how they could navigate, whether it's a challenging job market, the skill sets that they've then developed? Why does it make sense to go to business school now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Matt. And I think what master's programs really help students with is to give the technical skills, but then also those soft skills, which are so important when you're interviewing, when you're climbing the ladder, when you're in that job as well. So yes, our students learn marketing and finance and accounting, but together with that, with all of those team projects that I spoke about, with the immersive experiential learning that we have, they learn skills such as how to work together in a team, how to lead, also just learning things like how to build grit and resilience, how to goal set, how to time manage. All of these skills are so important. And I think just as important as those hard skills that students come into the program looking for. And I think together, they really help students to navigate that uncertain job environment. As Sara said as well, also just to figure out what they want to do. We have a lot of students coming to our program from a liberal arts background, and having the opportunity to do these different classes, doing that career exploration with our careers team as well, really just helps them to figure out what brings meaning and purpose to them, what do they want to do, and how do you figure out that roadmap, and how do we do it together to get you there.
Right. John, you're talking about sometimes choices and how you could be paralyzed by choice. There's the Masters in Management, that broader general management focus that brings, versus focuses on HR or supply chain and the multiple opportunities. Is that a sort of a discussion that you have with applicants who can't decide between keeping things broad with the Masters in Management versus a more specific specialization?
Yeah, so much choice, right? I think it's wonderful for undergrads. It's such an exciting time to be in higher ed, but you look at as far back as when I went to undergrad, and the choices were very limited coming out. There was generally 2 paths. There was law school and there was an MBA, which you had to wait a few years for. So this explosion in specialized and accelerated masters, I think, is exciting, but it can create confusion. I think for students, the first thing is, especially for the liberal arts background, is demystifying business and things like Nita talked about, accounting, finance, marketing. And I know all these programs on this call have such a diversity of backgrounds and majors. At Wake, we have 47 different majors in the MSM program. So students who think like, I can't do it, it's too hard, it can be done. And these curriculum are designed for liberal arts majors to segue into the business domain. But to your question, I think also really just spending some time unpacking it with an admissions person. You've got MSM, MIM, MSBA, MQM. It's incumbent upon the student to look at the curriculum and see if it aligns perhaps with any of their interests, or if perhaps they have a certain career goal and they look at, let's say, employment outcomes at a certain school and nothing is matching, that might not be the best place for them. But I think spending time with admissions representative and talking about, what you may want to do, what you may not want to do. I often find that students are really in three segments. They pursued an undergraduate area of interest or passion, but they don't find it now transferable to a professional outcome. They want to work in a certain industry, but they cannot get there without a master's, or they really have no idea whatsoever and are seeking to pivot from what they thought perhaps was career goal one. And I'm seeing some head nods. We work with all kinds of students like that, and then they go on to really successful pathways. So I think, again, doing your research and talking to admissions folks and attending sessions like this, of course.
Right. On Zoom, of course, when we used to do these panels, it was easier to read body language, but I definitely saw Sarah's head nodding as you talked about just the idea of where the masters will open the door, perhaps, Sarah, for individuals. Is that something that you see quite often? It's that sort of additional level of qualification that can create those opportunities?
Indeed, sometimes very specific. The question you just asked previously about economists, for instance, if they indeed want to go into finance, for instance, in a specialized master's program, then indeed it will open up more doors within high players in London, whether it's, the big names or really something to kind of set you apart, but also for students who indeed didn't previously, know it might have been possible to do a job within a big multinational or big corporation. People with maybe a doctor's degree who say, well, it's nice that I have this, medicine background, but I don't want to be just limited to that. I also want to do something maybe in business. Well, indeed, that kind of gives them the edge to then work for maybe a big, healthcare corporation, kind of seeing what are the new trends and strategies in that sector. So that's kind of, indeed, as John said, very specific and pinpointed towards that student, but very concrete in terms of really a success ratio towards that job that they will have eventually, and really making it, let's say, able to give that added value to the company in the sense that they would want to.
Right. John talked about the enormous number of electives. Virginie, for Insead, both with the Fontainebleau and the Singapore campus, what's the structure? Intensive, I'm sure, but the set curriculum, and then this idea that increasingly flexible, and the different electives that you can take in the latter part of the program. How does that work?
So you're very right in saying this is an intensive program, and the way we designed it is again on the same type of model that is dear to Insead, with the fast pace. So it's a one-year program. Indeed, so people really have to dedicate time to their studies, and it's impossible to do an internship at the same time as an Insead MiM program, for example. I don't know if some of our listeners had that in mind, but so the way we created it is to have some sort of theoretical approach to the topics, and topics that were highlighted before, so give you a sneak preview and an understanding of finance, a little bit of understanding of organizational behavior, and all these sort of elements, but then also move quickly away from books and library type of experience, but also going more into practicals, and this is where sometimes people can make a difference between schools, is that we bring in the classroom managing directors or CEOs and people we are used to work with from companies, and with whom we have relationship, and sometimes very often alumni from the school as well, who come back to the classroom and share their experience. But when I say share, it's just in listening. It's not listening mode. It's really actual participation. It's almost like playing a consultant role, putting a hat of consultant or experts in one domain, and making recommendations. So we brought in people in the class this year who really asked the students to be in the mode, in the type of mode that like in your future work environment, where you have time pressure, where you have budget pressure, where you have to pay attention to different elements, and this is condensed and put you in this sort of cooking pan, and then you have to come up with the best outcome possible. Then you come back to the classroom and debrief. So that's the idea that happens very much. You have that layer, so theoretical, practicals, and then obviously a lot of soft skills assessment and building. So that's those 3 layers that will accompany you through the program.
Got it. Well, with that intensity that Virginie is describing, Nita, you had talked about sort of grit and resilience that will also be skills that will serve them well. In the core program, there will be finance, there will be accounting, there will be those sort of fundamentals, discounted cash flow and everything else. One of our viewers has said, well, I have a history undergrad. So how do you ensure, your job title says admissions. You look to admit people, not reject them. So how do you ensure that in admitting them, they will thrive with all of those core courses, and that they have, the necessary number skills and other skill sets that make sure that they really flourish in the McDonough classroom?
So we, of course, I think probably like other schools here as well, take a holistic approach to admissions. And of course, part of that is looking at those quantitative skills. So we have a lot of students coming from liberal arts background in our program. And what we'll do is for that quant part, we will look at GPAs, we'll dive deep into transcripts, we'll look at any quant classes you might have taken. So you might be a history major, but perhaps you've done an econ class, perhaps you've done a calculus course, a stats course. So we'll dive deep there. We'll look at, any classes you may have repeated. How did you do the second time round? Perhaps you didn't do as well the first time round, but what was that improvement the second time round? We'll look at any test scores that you might have as well. So we look at all of these elements when we're obviously evaluating applicants. But I, of course, need to mention the qualitative aspect as well, because we're really looking to understand your unique journey. The math part isn't the only thing that's important. It really is a holistic approach. It's a full picture. So we'll also look at your essays, both video, written. We'll look at resumes, recommendations, to understand your motivations, to understand your unique journey. We'll look at what sort of extracurriculars have you done? Were you, did you manage finances or budgeting in a club on campus? All of these different things, voluntary experience that you might have, again, to understand those motivations, to see if you're a right fit. And yes, those quant parts, those math skills are important, because of course we want to make sure that everybody can thrive in the program, can do well in the program. We do also have help that we give to our students as well. So something new that we did this year with our students that started, I guess last year, our current students that started, was we understood that in this new environment where we had to start virtually, building community can sometimes be difficult, and it's such an important element of these programs. And so we did a month of summer programming where we helped students with different math courses and things like that, but it was really focused as well on getting to know one another, because students really do rely on one another. You might have a history background, but you might have somebody else that's an engineer in your program, and they'll also help you with those courses. So to get to know one another, we had Matt, you might like this, but we had a session on gritty resilience as well, gritty thinking, but all of these different sorts of things that really help to, so of course we look at it on the admission side, but then before you start the program, we really do try to prepare you to succeed in the program.
Right, and presumably welcoming in the class in September, at least the coming year, they've already had a sense of 12 months of the pandemic and that impact, and well prepared for. Are you confident, Nita, that the campus will be open in the fall?
We're planning for in-person classes in the fall, so socially distanced in person. So I'm very hopeful, and that is what we're planning for. Of course, I don't have that magic 8 ball, so I'm not entirely sure what will happen, but that is what we're planning.
Yeah, John, as you look at 4 years of undergrad versus 4 hours of a standardized test, and even that sort of I'm not the senior VP of anything at this early stage of my career. So sort of picking up on what Nita had said of this holistic approach, whether it's the positive impact that you'd had in a volunteer role, a leadership role perhaps you've had through college, just how you're looking at these different elements to really get a sense of the individual and of course what they're going to contribute in the Wake Forest classroom.
Sure, of course. Well, Nita definitely hit all the high notes there. We have never been a hyper test obsessed school with the GRE and GMAT. To Nita's point, and probably most of the schools in this call, because everyone seems so passionate about the student engagement. We look more at the transcript, the resume, the highs and the lows, any experiential work, learning, just background, resilience, perhaps first in their family to attend college or graduate school, just really the backgrounds. But interestingly, pre-pandemic, we actually instituted a test waiver policy for our pre-experience program. So if students had a transcript from a US-based institution, regardless of country of origin, or at a 3.2 or better on the US GPA scale, and had at least 1 to 2 quantitative or technically rigorous courses, the test was not a requirement for them. The timing was really interesting because we implemented those in December of 2019, and then as we know, things changed dramatically in early 2020. So we will continue with that as well. Certainly the closing of global test centers, created additional interest in students seeking test waivers. But again, I think all the things Nita mentioned, I'm not going to parrot them, certainly. And then with us, it was really interesting because we were able to stay open here with our campuses. But of course, we had a segment of the population that wanted to be here in the States, but could not get here because of the pandemic and global visa office closures. So that was an interesting balance too, was bringing a cohort together with students physically in our space and students who are online. And of course, the blended modalities, right? Words we didn't know 2 years ago that we know now. So we've really just been trying to strike that balance. But to circle back to your main question, it's more about the student, what's on the paper, the background. And then we do admissions interviews for every student. That's a critical piece. And that carries a lot of weight for us at admissions committee, is how the student conducts themselves. We have a short amount of time with that student. So can we give them everything they need in 10 months to be successful professionally and personally?
Right. Sara, you're talk about the ability to join campus. Well, in this case, you're joining us from the heart of the European Union and Brussels. As you're looking at an applicant and they're sharing, what they're looking to get out of the experience at Vlerick, you have this heritage with the universities of Leuven and Ghent in these spectacular buildings of the 14th, 15th century, but they're looking for a very contemporary experience at Vlerick. So for that international student, are you trying to understand the role that European study experience will bring, and what might be specific to Vlerick and Belgium?
Definitely. I think it's indeed something that a lot of students are looking for, the kind of European, explosion, let's say, the kind of idea of maybe if you want to stay on and really find a job here, whether it's indeed in Belgium, of course, teeny tiny country, but very close by to indeed France and the Netherlands and Germany. So already that is a full experience in itself. And we're definitely very well aware of that. As soon as students, have registered in our program, we get them immediately in touch with the international office to kind of see how do they get here and how can we maybe find accommodation together. We have a buddy system with some Belgian students. It's really fun to see indeed that they are really looking for that European experience as such, sometimes also very specific Brussels, because of course, indeed, as you mentioned, it's the capital of Europe. It's really where you have the big headquarters of multinationals. Also in terms of finance, it's really the place to be, especially now also with a little bit of the Brexit feeling coming over to Brussels, let's say. But it's really also the idea, and I think it's exactly also what Nita said, that kind of community feeling within the students. I mean, it's also nice to see now, even with the pandemic, a lot of our students were organizing international walks together with international students to indeed have a look at those impressive buildings in the Grand Place in Brussels, because that was one of the main reasons, of course, that they came here, and we don't want to have them miss out on that. The good thing is also, I mean, not a good thing about the pandemic, because there's no good thing, but one of the kind of side effects that came to it is that, of course, a lot of things are being done online and virtually. So even the network has broaden to even further than European alumni. And keeping time, with the time zone, keeping a little bit in regards to that, but we definitely make sure that they can now more easily connect with big international alumni from different companies. And I mean, Belgium is very small, Europe is very small. I think if anything has taught us in 2020, the world has become very small. So in that sense, it really makes for a great community feel within that group of students, and definitely within that European Union as such.
Right, that international coming together and the energy that it brings.
Yeah.
Virginie, of course, Insead has described itself as the business school for the world, 92 nationalities, I guess, in the MBA program. As you look for either the international credentials or the global mindset in the MiM applicants to Insead, they're younger, so they might not have had the chance to work in the financial markets of London or New York in their early 20s. How can you assess global mindset? Just study programs and exchange they've had, experiences that they've had during their childhood? What resonates with your admissions office?
Yeah, that's interesting. So for the first class, we were very pleased with 32 nationalities, with a class of 90. So with this sort of diversity, maybe we should pause before we come back onto this idea of nationalities and international exposure. Basically, is the fact that when we all praise for this diversity, I want people to keep in the back of their mind the purpose of this, the why we want this diversity, from history, from different GPAs, different type of environment, is really to bring an interesting and enriching experience to the classroom. So don't feel that you don't have the right background or the background that the admissions committee will expect. So history, I saw in the Q&A, history is perfectly fine, because we want this richness of the future interactions with the different viewpoint, because you obviously have a different way of thinking, and the thinking patterns are different following where you're coming from and the type of studies you have had. So to come back to this dimension of international, which is kind of a link, it's not just because you have an internship abroad or you have studied abroad that you can demonstrate that you are international. It's in fact coming back to the why and what you have learned from that experience that is really interesting. So let's say you've done an internship, you haven't moved abroad for that internship. However, your manager, your supervisor was from a different country, from a different culture than your own. And then that becomes very interesting. And this is where you have this international experience and how you can demonstrate things like your open-mindedness, your adaptability, your flexibility in understanding somebody from another culture. Same thing with the way you react in a sensitive mode. We have those jokes all the time with the Brazilians arriving late, but then that's a stereotype. But how does that translate into your experience and how you had to adapt? So it's more the learnings from all these experiences and this diversity than anything else. So I'm sure people can find examples of why they and how they adapted to an international environment without having to travel abroad.
Yes,
so that's the type of experience.
You're all wonderful detectives to be able to sort of discern open-mindedness, tolerance, how you would thrive with other cultures. Nita, I sometimes think that, if you're asked, well, what is your average GPA? What is your average GMAT? Those can be very reductive. If you were asked, what is the average height of your students? Someone's going to panic that they're 2 inches taller or shorter than the average. And it's not about those averages, right? It's now, in all of that, you're then bringing in the voices of recommenders. Who do you recommend at that early stage of someone's career, recently out of undergrad, that they would think of to write a letter of recommendation? Who are some good choices?
Yeah, so we usually recommend that, it could be a professor, so somebody who you might have taken a few classes with, who you might have, you might be a teaching assistant for, but somebody who perhaps interacted with more than just one class, who knows you, who can speak to your, to your work ethic, to your thinking, to the quality that you're going to bring. So I'd say the one common thing is people that know you better, and it could be a professor, it could be an internship supervisor, it could be somebody from voluntary experience, but somebody who knows you quite well, who's going to be able to write a thoughtful and a detailed recommendation, rather than just a vague recommendation where they read, where it shows they really don't know you as well. But so you really want to think about people that know you well and can comment on your strengths, your areas of improvement, those sorts of things.
Right, and presumably that goes beyond any bullet points that you might have on your resume, on your CV, to give the sort of the depth and insight and color of the impact of the role that you've played. That this is not them repeating the job description, it's actually giving a sense of, what makes you tick and perhaps even your value system.
Yes, exactly. It's bringing, I think, Matt, you put it very well, it's bringing color to your application. I mentioned before that we're really looking to understand your unique journey, and your recommendation providers really help with adding color to that picture, speaking to things that won't be on your resume that we can't see in that application.
Right, right. John, Sarah was talking about a world that, strangely has got smaller given the digital reach that we have. For anybody following us that wants to get to know the school and get a sense of, a shared cultural value and alignment, what do you recommend in terms of reaching out, to talk to current students, alumni? I'm sure you're offering sort of webinars and digital info sessions. What are for you good ways to really get a better sense of the culture of the school?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yeah, and Sarah really everyone's had such wonderful points this morning. I mean, I just look at the globality of all the folks just on this call from all around the world, and that we've had no technical issues. It's been a marvel. You pose such an interesting question, Matt, because oftentimes, a student will know whether or not it's the place for them when they physically set foot on the campus. And right now, for so many places, that's just not possible. We often wrestle with that elusive question around fit. When a student says, well, I'm going here as opposed to here because of fit, what does that mean? Unpacking what fit is. And oftentimes fit can be setting foot in a campus, going to a class, having lunch with a student ambassador. And a lot of our schools have not been able to do that this year because of pandemic restrictions. So I always think, of course, talking to student ambassadors, I'm sure all the schools in here, we have ambassador programs of currently enrolled students, talking to alumni, whether it's recent alums of your programs or even 5-year out alumni. We're maintaining, smaller schools have the benefit of maintaining really robust alumni networks. So I think the ability to do that is critical. And of course, always talking to a student who's living the experience to see what it's like, because I will always say nobody will tell it to you more straight than a student will, of course, certainly. Right. And then looking at where the students go, that's very critical piece of is this student perhaps in a pathway of a career I might like to have, or in a region I might like to have, or I really want to work, when I say abroad, I mean, I'm looking to my colleagues overseas here in other parts of the world, and can the school help me get there? So I think those are critical questions to ask. And I think, a lot of schools have done splendid jobs of offering now virtual web tours and 3D tours and VR tours and things like that. Really poking around on a school's site or a school's resources to see what they have. A lot of schools have YouTube channels now, looking there for day in the life videos and things like that. But when the opportunity presents itself again, and it will, for you to be able to physically walk and explore a campus, I think will always be a critical part of that candidate journey and finding the best place for them.
Right. So yes, we would love to walk through the Grand Place of Brussels, Leuven, or Ghent, and taste the incredible chocolates, the great beer. But given the current restrictions, Sarah, I'm going to ask the same question to all 4 of you. You get the question first. The other 3 have the time to think about and plan their responses. So spontaneity is everything. John had said, well, you'll get the straight answer from the student, that person that has lived the experience and through their prism. So if I was to sit down with a Vlerick Masters in Management graduate and said, okay, 3 things that really either stood out or I guess capture the experience, what do you think they're likely to tell me?
Well, I think I can tell you, and indeed, as Virginie already mentioned, we are in touch with a lot of our alumni, so I can think I have a pretty good idea what they would actually tell you and not have to make up too much myself. Well, first off, I think definitely the practical experience. I mean, a lot of students are coming from a real academic background, not even having been able to work on a project with a company. So really doing real life company projects and kind of really making a difference in that. If Unilever or P&G comes up with a new product and you need to be able to find a way to market that into a new I don't know, market entry strategy plan, well, that's very tangible. And maybe in a couple of months, you'll actually see it on their website. That's one thing. I think a second thing is definitely getting to know yourself even better through any of the personal development classes, any of the soft skills that you're going into. I mean, we're definitely not looking for all type A leaders within a business school. I think we're looking for a lot of creative types and motivators and planners, but indeed everyone has to work on those strict deadlines. So that's definitely something that you kind of, maybe meet yourself in a second way, so to say. And as a thirdly, I think definitely that networking, the community feeling, and really seeing how broad that network can get, whether it's with your fellow students, as Nita already mentioned, or whether it's indeed with, big companies that you might not have ever had the chance to talk to their CFO, CEO. So that's really, I think, the three big things that will have hopefully a lasting impact on them as well.
Right. Sarah's touched on this idea of Virginie that we spoke of just before we went live, of a generation and their sense of purpose, and whether it's a role that they want to play with cutting edge technology in the healthcare sector or fintech or whatever field. So of course you have welcomed that first class, and I'm sure the chance to really get to know them as they sort of hold that mirror back at you. What do you think are 2 or 3 things that have really sort of stood out in their experience?
This is the questions and discussions we are having at the moment, because obviously this is brand new, and we are launching our second admission cycle. We want to know how it is for them to be able to better also speak with our newly admitted candidates. And what has come out of the conversation is the first the fact that it's a practice-oriented approach, and they can really see that they can translate that quickly into their future position quickly. They also mentioned the fact that because they all started in Fontainebleau in France, which is a very kind of provincial type of French city, they like the fact that they could really bond together and have this chemistry from the very beginning, because we welcome them in person, so we managed to open the campus and have them in person. And they said that the chemistry happened also thanks to the fact that Fontainebleau is a small town, and they moved to Singapore all together, and they kept the synergy for the rest of the program that they had started in France. So that's also something that they really mentioned to us. And the last point is the collaborative aspect that we created, and the program director managed to create, to have this collaboration happening in the classroom and outside the classroom. So it's helping each other. It's regardless of your previous background, whether you're better at math or not, or better with other topics, helping each other and not having this competition type of attitude. So this is vivid in my mind because we just had those conversations with the current students.
Right. I guess we can leave that alpha attitude at the door outside the classroom, because from what you're describing, how they feel that they can have impact, how they can collaborate. I mean, it strikes me, Nita, there's a real sense of empowerment with the experience that you're giving them. How would that then sort of reflect as you think about the sort of feedback you get from McDonough graduates and say, this was absolutely key to my experience?
Yeah, so I think similar to my colleagues, one of the things that our alumni always speak about is the collaborative community. And I think it's one of the first things that they speak about, but being part of this community with like-minded people that want to have a positive impact on society. And then also just those lifelong relationships, those friendships that they build, not just with their classmates, but also with faculty, with alumni, and then other students as well who are studying different programs at Georgetown that they also interact with. So I think that's definitely one of the things that all of our alumni speak about. I think at Georgetown, another thing would be the focus on global business. It's something that they see all throughout the curriculum. And I think the students that apply to our program, are really looking for that. And it's obviously something that is crucial to our mission and something that we really do focus on. But it's throughout the different courses. We have a global consulting project where they work, overseas with a company. The global experiences in DC as well that they're able to leverage as well. And then I'd say the third thing, and again, similar to Sara and Virginie, I would say it's that immersive experiential learning, which I think a lot of master's programs, specialized master's programs provide. In particular at McDonough, we have a focus on technology and innovation as well. And so that's interwoven all throughout the different courses, throughout that immersive and experiential learning. So that's definitely something that they speak about as well.
Right. When we held the Centre Court Masters Festival in October last year, John, I sat down and interviewed a young woman who had used Wake Forest. She said, the faculty, the whole experience awakened in me an entrepreneurial ambition. And now she's, very successfully running this digital sort of social media business. Is that awakening a big part of the experience?
Yes, and I think all our alums are fantastic. I think you met with Haley, and she's particularly entrepreneurial. I think you talked about leaving your alpha out the door. I often refer to it as the sharp elbowed element sometimes of business school. At Wake Forest, the collaboration is, there's a competition, but it's a collaborative competition. And I think students realize that while they're an individual, they're also part of a whole. And, there's plenty of employment to go around is what I always say. So I think this sort of vision of students vying for the same role and things, I think is probably a bit of a notion of the past. But as far as the entrepreneurial spirit, yeah, our faculty are an interesting mix of your classically trained PhD faculty and what we call professors of practice. So folks who come from industry and really try and help a student open the mindset and see what's out there. And then, of course, I know all these schools offer wonderful and robust career services support to all students, regardless of country of origin or visa seeking status. And I think, that coaching piece is part of the journey as well, as what do you want to do with this degree after you've done all this work?
Yeah, I would encourage anybody to view the videos that we recorded a few months ago with your colleagues in careers and just the doors that you're opening, the opportunities that your alumni are pursuing. Sara, just briefly on the career track, we'd said coming into the program, there's this opportunity to explore. As you then look at the trajectories, are you sometimes, sort of marvel at, wow, look at what these people are doing and where they're doing it in the world?
Definitely. We had recently just one of our students, and then it was her I had in mind when I talked about the bioengineer student who started a startup with one of the fellow students who had done a business background. Very hot topic at the moment, because it's indeed the idea of having a sort of an oxygen mask, but kind of hidden it in glasses. And that was one of the startups that she then went out to do, combining the great, bioengineering background that she had with then the master's in management that she's obtained with us. But it can also be people that start indeed in those game-changing companies, like whether it's Salesforce or Google or anything that has to do with new technologies. We have a new elective on gaming and esports just for that reason, literally. So it sometimes baffles me, and it's very nice to see indeed those students then come back and kind of giving some tips and tricks to our new batch of students, even if it's sometimes not the world's greatest success story, but maybe after a few years, but also telling them how not to start. Well, that's actually a great story as well, and it's indeed a bit of a coaching from their side. So yeah, no, it's also what I think and probably goes for the rest of my colleagues as well, what we really love about the job, that you see these people coming in and then you see them kind of venturing out into all these different sectors and potential companies and really doing an amazing job and kind of, changing the world as you're sitting there looking at it.
Just bystanders. So with gaming and with esports, presumably, Virginie, and you publicly said we love our MiM students. with what they then bring and interactions that they're then having with the full-time MBA students, with the exec MBA students, that there must be just this wonderful sort of back and forth dialogue where, you know, everybody has something to learn from everybody else.
Mm-hmm. It's indeed a very good point that is often asked by prospective applicants, because they wonder how much that will be integrated with the other programs and how many interactions they will have. So to be very, very transparent, we have, for example, the student clubs. And the student clubs are obviously led by students, current students, and it can be a MiM or an MBA program student. And everyone can participate and bring expertise and experience to the club, be somebody who is quite senior and has been for 12 or 14 years into their career, and coaching, advising MiM students. So it's through the student clubs, it's through the different platforms. So we have what we call iLink at Insead. So it's some sort of LinkedIn, if you wish, platform, but that is only exclusively for admitted students and current students, as well as alumni, where there is this sort of community and exchange, and it's more on the professional level. It's not like a Facebook or a WhatsApp or another sort of this platforms. It's really more on advising and coaching, where indeed you can have people from any sort of programs but people from the Insead community who can advise, and that can come at any point in your career. It's not just because you are a fresh graduate from a MiM program that you will need that expertise or that advice. It can come 10 years down the road where you are a more experienced person. However, you would like to get an understanding of coding, and why you would like to have that experience, and you go back to a MiM student and somebody who is more junior. So it's going in all directions. So it's platforms that we put, it's opportunity that we provide during the program with student clubs, and hopefully as much as possible in-person interactions in the corridors, but otherwise via Zoom. We know how to foster those connections despite the Zoom.
And with all of the energy and ideas, Nita, perhaps just a word from you. You've welcomed a new administration into DC in recent months. And of course, any of our international viewers thinking about international studies, heading to Georgetown. Again, I don't expect you to have a crystal ball, but are you feeling really reasonably confident now that in terms of H1B and just, you know, opportunities then beyond the McDonough experience to explore those next career steps in the US, that's a fairly bright picture now?
Yeah, I think we are feeling optimistic with things opening up, especially like with the vaccination coming out and the rollout of that plan. But I think, like, you know, even currently our students that graduated last year, they've international students as well who have been able to stay on with the STEM designation and to secure roles that they've wanted to. But I think there's definitely an optimistic, I think, year or few years ahead.
Good. Well, it's lovely to finish. John, we have to end on that optimistic note. So perhaps a word from you. You know, I could frame it just in terms of what you love about the role that you have, or as you think about a particular student story. Sara was talking about this extraordinary biochemist and where she's going with masks within glasses. Do you have a favorite story?
Oh gosh, well, I'm glad Nita got the political question. But yes, I would support all of her sentiments that optimism is definitely on the rise here in the States. I think to Sara's point, you know, she said a little bit differently, but the most high risk students oftentimes can be the most high reward. Just watching them go on the journey is so exciting, and being able to watch them through the classroom experience, and then as they go on as alumni, we try and actively stay very connected with our alums. So we're not only professional colleagues, but also truly friends, and just watching students 1 year out, 2 years out, 5 years out is so gratifying. Excuse me. So that's my favorite part, is just watching that student journey from intake to output, as I like to say. Thank you for the question.
I made the comment earlier, all four of you are focused on admitting people rather than rejecting, and that faith that you place in a person, and to then see that being rewarded and where they go with it, it must be an absolutely wonderful moment for each of you. Well, I guess at the heart of Centre Court, trying to share the personalities, the energy, the warmth, the encouragement, the ideas, and all four of you absolutely embody that. And I couldn't have hoped to start the festival on a more optimistic and encouraging note. I know that the participants will now want to meet with you, and obviously other viewers that will be reaching out, but to Virginie and to Sara, to John and to Nita, thank you very, very much for spending the last hour with us at Centre Court, and for all of the warmth, energy and ideas that you've brought. So thank you, all four of you. And
Thank you for asking such wonderful questions and for moderating.
You had
Yes,
great answers.
thank you, Matt.